So welcome everyone to episode 31, Shark Attack Case Files. So today we're going to have a deep dive into the 2022 Simon Nellist attack, which took place just off Sydney. Yeah, so it just took place here, just off Little Bay, Buchan Point. So jump into it. So just to define these statistics and go into a bit more detail, just so we're 100% clear on this. According to the global case file, so these are just registered case file attacks. So obviously the real number of attacks is obviously always going to be remain unknown. So the ones that exist in the global files in Australia, there's been 1,443 cases, shark attack cases, and of those in Australia, there's been 299 fatal. So obviously this is damn lies and statistics, and the first one dates back, 5 BC. Aboriginal rock paintings depict shark attacks. So there's been people being killed in Australia way before colonialism. And the last one was this one, 2022, in February. And actually, this attack on Simon Nellist was actually the first confirmed attack by a great white shark on a person in Sydney. Because the last attack that took place in 1963 was, believe either to be a bronze whaler or a bull shark. But if you break it down into states, actually, funnily enough, New South Wales does have the most registered fatalities, 105. So just bear that in mind. And then you got the southern states tend to be more great white shark attacks. And if you go up here in like the Torres Straits, which is up here, and then like Queensland, Northern Territory is only 3 attacks. But these will be a more diverse species. So you'll start getting fatalities here by bull sharks, tiger sharks, and great whites. But then obviously down here, around here, it's going to be mainly great whites. Before we dive into this, just so we're 100% clear on something else, just in terms of the classification, just because of what we're going to discuss at the end of this attack, and we're going to go into a bit of detail on some recent scientific papers which have been published on mistaken identity. So there's basically 2 categorizations of attacks. Some of you might already know this. There's obviously unprovoked bites, which are incidents in which the bite is on a live human, occurs in the shark's natural environment. So this will be most of them, and they're subcategorized into territorial attacks, investigations, predations, and mistaken identities. So this particular attack, there's question marks in the media whether it was mistaken identity or it was a predation, and this is the main discussion point. And then you get unprovoked attacks, which are accidental attacks, like if you caught a shark on a boat or you antagonize a shark on purpose and it bites you. So in terms of the basic information, this attack took place on the 16th of February. The victim, Simon Nellist, he was 35. He was open water swimming, and he was attacked by was believed to be, and obviously there's the video evidence, the footage that it was a 4.5 meter, 15-foot great white shark, and the attack took place at 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the afternoon, and the water depth was roughly 5 to 12 meters. I'll go into that in a bit more detail as well. So about 15 to 40 foot water depth, and he was from the actual beach point. He was 150 meters, which is about 164 yards from the beachhead. But he was only 10 to 15 meters, which is about 32 feet adjacent from Buchan Point. Full moon phase, water temperature there. 71 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 23 degrees Celsius. Type injury, catastrophic fatal injury. And it was a predation, which you might have seen on the footage also. And the narrative was he was training for an open water swim. So you can see what I mean here. I've managed to plot this Baffy information around these 2 beachheads, and you can see this drop off here. This is in meters. So the attack actually took place just at the point in which he would have swum over this deeper section. So the shark would have been patrolling this deeper section of water. This is like 12 meters of water, and that's where it launched its attack from the deeper portion of the water column. So Yeah, you know, you probably read a lot of this detail yourself, but Simon was training for this Malabar swim, which is a 5 kilometer swim. I mean, this guy like toured Afghanistan. He was a professional diving instructor. Yeah, he's an incredibly strong open water swimmer. Swam every day. He loved the sea. He even called for, you know, ban on shark nets, stuff like that, drumline, and he was all against that. He's originally from Cornwall, the UK, obviously where I'm from, the UK, and he was, as I said, outspoken, and he was a naturalist, so he didn't discriminate against sharks, and he was completely against killing sharks. So yeah, and this attack took place where he only had 150 meters left to go to the beach of a total swim length. It's about 2 kilometers, so about 2,200 meters swim. And some of the key bits of information that I've picked out, I'll just run through them. And yeah, so just run through the attack. And that one of the eyewitnesses said that the shark actually breached. So the shark actually breached and cut him straight in half. So he would have died very quickly. Hopefully, he would have died of hypervolemic shock. So just that dramatic catastrophic loss of blood. Hopefully his body went into shock and he died very quickly. Otherwise it would have been exsanguination, and maybe he would have bled out over a minute or a couple of minutes. Yeah, so the shark bit him in half, and then it actually took some of the remains closer in to feed on it. And you've seen the video, the shark just continually just keeps coming back and feeding on the dead body. And some of the remains were found, but there's no coroner's report released, but they're believed to be some of the remains were found, but they won't say how much or what. But some of his wetsuit was found and was recovered also, because it's funny, some of these sharks have a knack of pulling people out of wetsuits. Like we've seen it in other attacks that they pull people out of dive suits. It's just, that is crazy. Yeah, and another item that I've picked out is that the nearest meta seal population is over 100 miles away south of Sydney, is Montagu Island. So there's no meta seal populations here. So this shark wouldn't have been actively feeding on seals in this area just because the lack of the meta. And another point I picked out is that this guy Simon, he was a big guy, so he was 6'5" tall, which is, funnily enough, exactly the same size and weight of an adult fur seal. So, and you know that this is all circumstantial stuff, but you know it could have been that his size and dimensions, you know, triggered this catastrophic predation. Yeah, and obviously seals are way more agile than humans, but yeah, similar profile, which we'll go into in a bit more detail. Yeah, and the water temperature was slightly warmer, caused by the El Nino, which some people believe pushed bait fish closer to the coast. There was also runoff from the beach, which caused more nutrients in the water, algae build up, which obviously equals more bait fish, and then you got obviously the whole food chain, which would obviously bring in sharks. There was actually floods in New South Wales at the time, so that would have exacerbated that also. He was also swimming alone. As mentioned, he was wearing a black wetsuit, which we know with the shark's retina detecting like visual motion and shape cues. The contrast does help the shark, so that black and white contrast will help the shark identify what it's going to attack. Yeah, there was people fishing, so there was bait in the water. You know, and as I mentioned, this bathymetric drop off was definitely a factor, because he was hit just on the crest of this deep drop off. So that, as I said, the shark would have been patrolling here. So you know, possibly that was a factor, which is a typical strategy. And then another thing I picked up on, there was a lot of birds in the area, which is always a sign that there's a lot of food in the area as well. Because if you have the birds, there's always a proliferation of bait fish in the area, so that's always a dead giveaway. Yeah, and then before, yeah, this is the area. So this you might have seen this in the video. So the attack would have took place just off the beachhead here. Yeah, and what's interesting about this attack is that this type of thing does divide the scientific community. So you'll get different points of view on this, where you'll get somebody like David Efbert, who's a shark scientist, and where, you know, when they're asked by the media to comment on this, he'll say stuff like, yeah, humans are not on the menu. He'll say stuff like, you know, there's occasionally shark incidents like we saw with Simon, but generally they are very rare. And in the case of surfers, they probably can't make out exactly what it is, stuff like that. And then you have Dr. Laura Ryan, which she's another esteemed shark scientist, and we're going to look at one of her papers in a minute. And from the perspective of the white shark, what she's saying is that neither visual motion nor shape cues allow for unequivocal visual distinction between pinnipeds and humans, supporting the mistaken identity theory behind a lot of these bites. And she also says that she doesn't believe sharks can see in colour. And then you have somebody like Ralph Collier, who's an expert on shark attacks, and he does all the case files for like California or the west coast of America, and he'll take a slightly different view on it. So he thinks that mistaken identity is valid for some great white shark attacks on humans, but he'll then go on to say that there's not nearly as many as as you'd be led to believe. So that and in order for a human to be mistaken for a pinniped, either water visibility must be negligible or the shark's vision poor. So he sort of has almost a counter argument saying that it doesn't believe that they're always mistaken identities. So basically there are schools of thought on this. That's really what I'm getting into. Yeah, and just before we just really need to understand the shark's senses. So you probably know that sharks have been around for 450 million years of evolution. So they have a highly developed senses. They have acute sense of smell. Great white shark has a very large olfactory bulb. So they have ears, two small opens behind their eyes. These cells are very sensitive and they can detect tiny vibrations in the water. Sharks also have an ear stone which responds to like gravity, so they know what way's up and down. Their vision isn't bad, but there's some conjecture over this, how well they see. Also, they have an adaptation to roll their eyes back to protect them. They also have taste buds in their mouths. They have electrical receptors on their nose, which we know about. Also, touch and pressure sensors through their lateral line. So they can detect like pressure changes, all sorts. So what I'm trying to get across is that humans, we can't begin to fathom how all this information is processed by large great white sharks. What I'm trying to get at, so all that millions of years of evolution, like how they build a picture with all that information to feed, because that's really all they do. That's their main priority, is to just feed and procreate. Yeah, and then some just getting into a bit more detail on the vision, just with this slide here. Yeah, that because they're where their eyes are situated, they have almost nearly 360-degree field of vision. They have just two dead zones right in front of the eyes and just behind. So if you wondered where the safest place to be was, that is it. Yeah, and then this tabetum lucidum is this reflective layer that they have like a cat's eye, which allows light to be reflected back onto the retina, which allows them to see better in actually darker conditions. So in gloomier water or more turbid water, they can actually see better. And then this is where it gets a bit murky, because when you search on the internet, whether are sharks colorblind, you'll get different answers basically. And a lot of these studies only look at juvenile sharks, and they don't really know. They know that the retina contains a lot of cone cells, but does it contain rod cells? You'll just get different answers what papers you look at, and scientists are still trying to determine how sharks interpret color, or even if they can interpret color at all. Yeah, so this paper here by Laura Ryan et al. That was published in October 2021. And what they've done is they try to reproduce silhouettes in an actual pool, like in a seal, and then like a test plate swimmer, surfer, and then what they've done is they took underwater footage of this and then measured it as vectors under two different conditions of cycles per degree, which is how you measure detail of an object separately without it going blurry. So I think humans have something like 30 cycles per degree, while a dog will have like 12. So this just gives you an understanding. And something like a hawk will have like way more, but then what they done is just assumed that a juvenile great white shark had a figure of either 5 or 2.5. So they used this to extrapolate these vectors to try and work out how well these matched up, basically. So, and the results showed that at 5 CPD, the swimmer and the surfer did differ significantly from the seal at that range, but at 2.5, only the rectangle differed from the seal. So there was some difference. And then in a lot of their key conclusions here, I'll run through them. So from a visual perspective, a juvenile great white shark, the vision motion cues of both human swimmers and paddling on a surfboard were not significantly different from a pinniped swimming at the surface, with a spatial cue of around 2.5. So yeah, so what they're saying is that if you assume a shark cycles per degree is only at 2.5, so you have to make that assumption that that's how well they see. And if you make that assumption, what you say is that there's no difference. A shark wouldn't be able to tell. But then the higher up you go, so at 5, there would be little difference. So the shark would have little difference between the two. So, but this was done. Yeah, and they also said that a juvenile great white shark would be able to distinguish prey by around 10 meters. So obviously, but a larger shark that would be higher. So shape cues of a human either swimming or paddling a surfboard were statistically non-discriminable from those of a pinniped when analysed using a virtual shark visual system. Yeah, and then I think the main conclusion here is that in their results they indicate that a poor spatial resolving power of a shark's retina may result in bites in humans as a result of mistaken identity or ambiguous visual cues. So the modelling here was done in very ideal conditions, so this scenario would likely to be of greater significance under more realistic conditions like surface chop or more turbidity in the water. Yeah, so, and also they said, like, while it seems unlikely that every bite on a human by a great white shark is a result of mistaken identity, our results suggest that the circumstances where surface objects like surfers are targeted by great white sharks are very possible. Yeah, so I mean, this is a really interesting report. You can Google this and have a read for yourself, but it does support it. That's what that I do agree with it. It does support it, but it was done under ideal conditions, and also it was done from the perspective of a juvenile shark. So obviously this is not, the way that science works is that you're making a lot of assumptions here, and that I find some of these papers are quite biased, basically. But still, it's a this is a legit paper. Yeah, and you can muddy the waters further here. There's also theories like the fat criterion theory has also been looked at by other scientists. So this is a theory that muddies the waters further with mistaken identity, because this theory proposes that the great white sharks actually tailor their bite and their bite force based on the prey and the fat content of the prey and how it feels in their mouth. So, but they actually done a study on this. So Peter Kimley, another shark scientist, he ran an experiment off the Farallon Islands using like dead pigs, dead lambs, and seal carcasses, and they actually found that the sharks bit all three to try and figure out what they were, but they only consumed the pig and the seal meat because it had a much higher fat content, and the sharks just left the sheep just because the wool was unsavoury and the meat was too lean, so they just didn't eat it. And they reckon that the shark's teeth actually act as sensors, and we've seen with sharks, removing dive gear from people, like wetsuits. We've seen that on some other attacks where they'll actually remove the equipment, like they can feel their way around what they don't want and they can discard it. Obviously they have a conveyor belt of new teeth coming through, and these teeth actually move. Their teeth, sharks' teeth actually move, and they reckon that they actually relay information to the brain. And they done another experiment on this where they got a shark to bite some meat to see whether it would like it or not, and they reckon that in in the space of sort of like zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.2 seconds, the shark's able to make a decision whether to carry on biting or to release. And they done this like using a camera with like 3,000 frame rates per second. And the shark, yeah, was able to make a decision that quickly on what it had bitten into, whether to bite harder or to just let go. And the shark was able to actually distinguish that, you know, through the senses of his teeth and the taste buds in his mouth. Yeah. So yeah, and you know, I mean, you got to think that sharks, great white sharks particularly, they're not part of the human sort of evolutionary diet. So they didn't grow those 450 million years. There's never been humans in the water. Probably only been humans in the water for the past 100,000 years. Yeah, so we're not part of their evolutionary diet. Yeah, maybe there's like a modality to it depending on what the shark is feeding on in the area. Yeah, and I mean the thing is that sharks, their bite force is like the most powerful out of any animal. It's like 4,000 psi. So that if they wanted to, they can cut you in half easily. But not all bites end that way. So that sharks, they can just be feeling, yeah, which sort of takes you back to this slide where you get these investigation bites where the shark is definitely using his senses to feel you out. And the same, and then mistaken identity is what I was saying about when the sharks make an attack, but then they abort because they know what they're biting into. But then the thing is, you do then get attacks like Simon Nellist, where that, in my opinion, looking at all this evidence, that the shark just made, you know, it used all its senses to make a decision on Simon, and it saw what it saw, and then it decided to make a catastrophic hit on him. It went up, hit him, and I think because he was such a big guy, it then chose to bite down harder. So it then just bit him in half. It made that decision, like the teeth and the senses in the mouth made this decision to bite him in half. And then for whatever reason, it then made the decision to eat him. So I mean, and that's the thing people have to understand is this does happen, and it is extremely rare. And I mean, this guy was extremely unlucky, but to me, the problem I've got with it is that it was only the proximity that was unlucky. The rest of it was a certainty, and unfortunately that is just the way it is. So yeah, I mean that's a long video, rambled on a bit there, but I hope you enjoyed it. Laters.